Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome back to The Way of the Showman, where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. My name is Captain Frodo, and I will be your gracious guide and host of this podcast. This is a leg of the journey, as I sometimes like to call it, but today we are doing something. We're continuing on from last episode, where we are exploring questions, and last time we explored relationship perhaps between the ideas that goes into creation and all the ideas that goes into a show, and where all those ideas and the ideal version of the show meets reality when it is being put on stage, and what is being learned from the first run of shows of putting a show on stage in Brooklyn. And we are continuing with the conversation with Jay Gilligan, and this time the topic that we will explore, which I think it illuminates topics differently when they are developed through conversation, as opposed to me having thought it thoroughly through and then written such extensive notes that I can express myself in depth and clearly and tie off every end or whatever. Not that I claim that that's what my essays normally do, but that at least it's been thought through, and it has a different kind of stasis. It's a bit more static perhaps when I just explain one point of view, rather than when we are developing ideas through conversation. So that is what this mini-series is about, exploring topics of showmanship, performance, acts, and entertainment, and the introduction of meaning into entertainment. And we're exploring that through conversation. And like last episode, we are back with Jay Gilligan, and this week's topic is we're trying to grapple with skill-based acts. What can we learn by looking in depth at them? And me, who have focused so much on writing and on structural developments and stuff, I am now trying to get some of Jay's wisdom and knowledge about this, as a person who has delved deeply into skill-based acts. So, without further ado, here is our conversation. How you going, Jay?
Hey, things are great. I'm super excited to talk to you today, because I know last time we talked, you mentioned a few notes you had. You wanted to ask me about some ideas about skill, and
that's right.
I can't wait.
I've changed my mind. I know I said I was going to drop doing tricks, and I'm just going to do stand-up and storytelling. That might have been a little bit of an exaggeration. That's not quite what I said, but I wanted to develop that, doing speaking and not doing...
You had that story about the king that was going really good. I remember.
Yeah. Doing the story about the king and how I met Prince Charles and whatever. And it started out as a good story, and it's a crazy thing of how showmen like us, sometimes you end up in situations where you're talking to royalty and whatever, and it's a bit weird, but it's cool. Anyway, then I was going to decide, okay, I'm going to have to make a new family show, because there's just a market for that. It's like a sort of side niche. I'm doing the shows for adults like I've always done, events and all that sort of stuff. And then I went, okay, I'm going to have to do some acts, some skill acts. So I've started, first of all, to make a opening act, which is a skill act. It's a hat juggling act with a cane. So it's a hat juggling act with a cane. And you saw that act when I was working on it. And then I'm working on a rollerball act where I'm doing a rollerball on a table where the leg falls off. And so it's a bit of a slapstick element to it. And I'm juggling and eating an apple with handcuffs on top of the table. So then I'm going to build that up as the kind of stunt that's going to happen in the end of the show. But all that may be as it may. But I just thought that it would be great for me to have a conversation with you, because you are not only a good friend, you're also somebody who has been teaching skills to mainly juggling, but teaching skills for 20 years. So I thought it's like having a conversation now that I'm going through something which is kind of your domain of putting together acts with skills. And I have
quite a different style than yours or whatever, and the work that we've done with the reflex has sort of put you into my way of working a bit, or like of course, I'm just adding mine as a flavor onto yours. But so now I thought I'd try to get you to tell me a little bit about your ideas surrounding doing skill acts, which, as far as I understand it, has been what you've been doing for the last 20 years or whatever, and what you're famous for. So maybe I'll start it off with a sort of question or whatever to get it started, and we'll just start really basic, which means it probably gets complicated. But like, what do you think skills are? Just like, I mean, can any skill? Because I'm of course always wondering about. It can be wide, so you can put it in. But how do you frame skills when you talk to your students or when you're talking to me?
So, yeah, I mean, man, I love it. It's like the first question is like, it's just like infinite. No, but I think my answer of that is a kind of a question back to you, and I don't need to get stuck in the beginning here of like having to go backwards. But I think really related to that question of what is a skill and what I think is a skill. You said a few times that recently in some of these shows, the past couple of years you've been doing since coming back from Vegas, that you would go do these events, these performances, and people would come up to you and kind of have this attitude of that like, oh, Frodo, you could just do anything, man. Like, you're so funny and you're so good that you could just, like, I could just watch you do anything, Frodo. I could watch you put on your socks, or I could watch you eat a sandwich, or, you know, and then correct me if I'm wrong, or I probably am wrong, but like, that's where this telling the story about the king was a little bit motivated, maybe that.
Yeah.
Could you speak a little bit? Because when you told me that thing of these people coming up to you saying like, oh, Frodo, you could just do anything you wanted, you definitely had a strong reaction to that. And I really related to what you said. And then you kind of discovered this little new little wave or something. But because I mean, the thing is, you couldn't just do whatever. You couldn't just eat some, drink some soup.
I guess it is that my style of performing has enough, what do you want to call it, like acting or whatever in it. There's a level of subterfuge. It's like there's a level of magic involved in it. Like when I'm doing my act, the tennis act, for instance, it looks very chaotic, and they think that I'm just responding to things that happens in the moment. I do also respond to them if anything happens in the room or whatever, and I really genuinely try to get myself into a headspace of connecting with them beforehand, like that event that you saw me do, where I'm finding key things to ask them about and talk to them when I'm talking to them as a group, and I know what they've done that day, and I'm going, wasn't that amazing? Yeah, that is so cool, that thing you did. You were out there on that island, man. Who got seasick on the boat? Nobody did. Okay, and managed to say that anyway. So anyway, and then they think that I can talk about or do anything, but really I can just do those acts or whatever. Like, but I'm glad that they get that feeling, because that's the character, I think, that they see. So they connect emotionally to me. And also another thing is that when I do events or do gigs where there's like older people or whatever, and they're sort of like, oh, I don't like what it is that you do, but I really like watching you or whatever. Like they're sort of going, I don't want to see anyone swallow a sword, but I laughed really hard when you were doing your act. So
I mean, that's funny, because you were also talking about maybe finding in some cases you might have to find a new way to describe what it is that you do, because precisely that, when people see you do it, they love it. I mean, really love it. I've seen that firsthand so many times and felt it myself. But then again, when you speak to certain people in certain markets or contexts and you say, oh, I'm a sword swallower, then exactly that. Sometimes people say, oh, I don't want sword swallowing. That's nothing we want for our event. But you're not. Yeah, it's hard to describe, right? It's just funny because when you said what is a skill, this is kind of also part of the conversation. Well, the skill swallowing a sword, is that what you do? No.
Yeah.
You do literally swallow a sword, but
yeah. Now I get you. You were actually fishing for a specific story there or whatever. That's right. Those people came, and an older lady came down after that event, and she said, "Oh man, I thought when I heard what you were going to do, I thought I don't want to see this." we've just worked on renovating this house for this club that we're doing the gig for 5 years, and it literally is finished today. I just want to go home, have a glass of wine on my balcony. And then she said, but my son said, you got to go and see Captain Frodo. He's going to do all this stuff. And you got to just trust me. Just go and see. And then she went there and she said, I laughed so hard that now I am in pain all over my body because I laughed so hard. And thank you so much and all that. And I thought I didn't want to see it, but I'm so glad that I did. And that's basically what I sort of try to need to convey to people, because when you say, oh yeah, I put a spoon up my nose and catch it behind my ear, but I talk about emotions and people get really moved, but they're also laughing hysterically or whatever. And I know that's the responses that they have, but the foundation of it is, I'm going to put a spoon in my nose, and I'm going to squeeze through 2 rackets and do
a
something.
skill. The foundation is a skill. I mean,
well,
back to this. Yeah.
And that's the other thing, that there's the skill of talking, because that's actually the performing is also kind of a skill.
Yeah.
So how I'm narrowing it down now, it's physical skill, as in you're doing skills. It's a physical skill of where here's a trick. Now I take this, like one of the skills I'm learning now. I'm putting the cane on my chin, and I throw the hat up, flip it up in the air, and it lands on top of the cane. Pull the stick away, and it falls down onto my head.
Yeah.
Structurally is the finale of my thing. It's not the most advanced thing, but I've made a structure in the act that makes it make sense when this happens in the end. So now I'm learning that, and just arrived here in Kristiansand, and I have been practicing inside my house, which, as you know, has a very high ceiling. And now I come here, and now I've been practicing outside, and holy moly, it's completely different. I went from having it like 8 to 9 out of 10, 7 out of 10. I would get it on the stick, and then I went down here and throw it up just with sky over, and it was like,
there's no reference point for the balance. When you balance outside, you just lose all the peripheral reference points, and you just feel like you're falling over. At least I do.
Yeah, it's really weird. But today I just had a streak of doing 7 hits on the top, throwing it up in a row. So it's coming back again, and I just got to focus, sort of get the focus between the stick and me. I've sort of changed the way that I focus or where I flip or whatever, but still, then I lose it, and it's like it's completely lost, and I've just become a beginner again. So with all of this said, that it's this kind of physical skill what we often talk about as tricks or whatever. So at least if we start there, then we can talk about presentation and the further things. But I'm thinking physical, technical skill. If this makes sense.
that was kind of a perfect beginning to get to where I wanted to go, because you did ask me what was skill, and in what you just said right now, you kind of uncovered one part of my world, because like you said, I've been this skill or tricks. It's what I've been doing my whole career. And so you said, well, talking is also a form of a skill. But then you said, we're talking about physical skill here. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, in my world, it is also ambiguous, even when we talk about physical skill. Like, there are some areas of ambiguity. So, and I can try to give you an example without going too deep on the juggling side. But like when I was a kid, and I've said this before, I think with Eric on my Object Episodes podcast, but quickly I can say, when I was a kid, my skills were defined by the objects I used. So, I'm going to juggle my clubs, and then I'm going to juggle rings. I'm going to juggle balls. I'm going to juggle plungers. That's how I would talk about my skills. But a few years after that, the world's moving on and it's developing. And then all of a sudden I'm doing not props but trick, like under the leg. And then I can do that under the leg throw with balls or with clubs. It's not tied to the specific object, etc. And then this kind of keeps developing in my world. And what I wanted to say was, because when you asked me earlier, what is a skill? It's so hard today, because this progression from when I was a kid has kept going to the point where, yes, there are specific tricks I can point at, like in my work and in the work that's out there right now. And I can say, in the same way that you swallow a sword in that act, right? I can go, Frodo, what's your act? I swallow a sword. That's like way oversimplifying the fact, right? Even physically, there's other things happening. Like you've got your hat with the cucumber, and you're doing all these other things that are those skills. Well, maybe not in the traditional sense. 30 years ago, you wouldn't really say, wearing a hat is a skill, but it's definitely a huge part of your act. And so it's the same thing. We normally, I mean, this is a struggle, man. This is a huge ball to untangle, but it's like, normally we say skill, it's a physical thing that you learn that has some sort of value to it in terms of difficulty, I guess, or risk or whatever.
Yeah. Skill,
now,
difficulty, or risk.
Yeah, but then all of a sudden it's like, there's so many things that you do in your work, and so many, that's physical, not, that's really physical. And so many things I do in my work, that's not what we would say is a traditional skill, but it's still physical. It's like a little movement. It's a transition. But those are the kind of the important details that makes it all hang together and that makes it a whole. So, man, I mean, the question is, what is a skill? It's becoming less and less defined. And that's really hard to communicate to a student. I mean, there's definitely exercises you can do, though. And I'll just kind of maybe wrap up this thought with a little example that's concrete. So back when you used to go to juggling festivals when I was a kid, like I said, people would practice the Diablo, or they would practice cigar boxes. Then later on, they would be practicing, under the leg or behind the back, but then they could use different objects. Like, oh, I'm gonna try to do my back crosses with 3 clubs. Then I'm gonna do my back crosses with 5 clubs. Like you keep that trick, but you change the number or the object. But then after a while, I would say like 20 years ago, you go to a festival and people were starting to do little sequences. So like 3 or 4 tricks in a row, and you would connect them. And that was the cool part. Oh man, did you see that sequence over there across the room? It was so cool how they went from this trick into that one. And that became like the valued thing. And so suddenly you get all these little connecting pieces of technique that nobody, 10 years before that, they would have laughed at you if you would have done this little like flip of the club, or it's maybe you don't even let go of the club or something. You just kind of twist it a little bit. But now 10 years later, all of a sudden that little twist is the cool part. You see what I mean? Like it's the part that enables the sequence. And what I find, the further we're going right now in the future, it's like suddenly those little transitions are becoming the main focus. So these like little meaningless, undefinable pieces of technique are like the cool thing now, even though I don't think people have the language to talk about it, or even maybe the consciousness to really focus on it. Those are the defining moments now, what people think makes something cool. You hear those words that they say flow. Oh, I love the flow of that. It has such a great flow, or whatever. Or the visual was so cool, or whatever. What they're talking about is that enabling of the choreographic moment, the visual, to be tied together through these little weird non-tricks. So so it's just like, and so then maybe one way concretely to talk about it in terms of learning something, or like in terms of teaching, or in terms of practicing, I came up with this idea of divisions of time. And that's as far as I've gotten. But I started to notice what are the different units of time, because we don't have a common understanding of that in our lives. So I started to do an exercise in my teaching that a few years ago. It's one of my favorite things to do. I just take a big piece of paper and I say, to whoever's in the room, what's the biggest length of time you can think of? And of course you can go really philosophical. Oh, the end of the universe, or your lifetime, or whatever, right? Okay, that's cool. We'll get all that out of the way. But then we start to say, what's shorter than the biggest length of time in terms of like performing or your technique? And they go, oh, maybe a tour. And then what's shorter than that? Maybe or a career, you could say, whatever. A career, a tour, a show. And you just keep going smaller and smaller and smaller. And I'll skip all those steps in the middle, which you should fill out on your own, because they're really funny to try to think of. How many levels of separation of degree can you find? It's really funny. But at the end, you start to get down to things like, well, what's shorter than a sequence? And then you could say, well, a trick. Okay, what's shorter than a trick? Oh, a throw. Okay, what's shorter than a throw? A catch, a grip, a start. I mean, it's also about language being ambiguous, but I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about reality. Like, what is a shorter moment than a trick? Is it just a single throw and a catch for juggling? Maybe it's a transition. Is a transition shorter than a trick? Yeah, I think we kind of intuitively agree that it is. but what in the world does that mean? So I haven't gotten farther than that, other than to start to pay attention to these hierarchies of how we think about our technique, and the words we use to speak about them, I think, is very powerful. Just like the definition of juggling and all those other things. So that's kind of where I'm at in terms of what is a skill. It's a kind of a mess right now, I guess.
That's it's not a mess. It's just like anything. When you look at it sort of ontologically, then it's always it gets complicated. And I thought that as well. As soon as I asked these really straightforward, very basic questions, then from somebody like you who think as much as me, then it is actually surprisingly complicated. And I'm just gonna get something and put some ice onto my computer because it's
oh yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Doing some skills while we I'm gonna try and put this thing under my computer to cool it down. It's having
I got a heat warning on my computer today too.
It's such a hot conversation. I think.
Well, so
but yeah, so I find that really interesting. Of course, it's complicated, but I also think that maybe there's then skills. They're sort of on a bit of a spectrum. That there are certain things when you see it, you know, this is a skill. Like let's say it's you juggle 3 balls or 5 balls, and you go, this is a skill, and you know it is. And then all that stuff in between, the sequences and all those other things, that might be stuff that maybe the general public don't necessarily pick out. They just think that in my acts, they think that it's just a coincidence, or it's just something weird that happened, or and then that thing happened, and they don't know that that was part of the transition or whatever.
Yeah.
So maybe it's like those are part of the performance of it, or whatever. And then maybe even in that, because I always love to think about what does this tell the audience? What does this give them? Or like, what is their response when you go, oh, that's a real cool visual, or that's a real cool flow, how one goes into the next. And part of what makes that cool is, of course, that that's where you see styles develop. So I don't know if you in this following on the idea of like just development of styles, that when you're a kid and you go, then I juggle my clubs and then I juggle my plungers, and it's like you asking Karl-Heinz Zieten going, is this what kind of tricks they did? Oh no, they juggled a cascade with the fire torches, and they juggled with the knives, and then they juggled a cascade with the balls. So as it now is coming, you're watching that evolution of it's becoming more and more about detail and about style and about flair, and it's the same within skateboarding or whatever, where it's not just enough with it. Did you do the kickflip? And you're going, yeah, I did, but did you do it with your pants sagging and looking cool and smoking a cigarette and listening to AC/DC, or did you do it like a dork?
Yeah.
Or did you do it with a dork, and that was the coolest thing in the history of the world?
Totally.
So it's that goes into kind of then presentation as well. And I guess skills are always, but to me there is something about a skill, like because I think of like things like acting or whatever, or the performance of it, or the character. Those are skills that I think of a little bit like invisible skills. Like a lot of my skills are invisible. It looks like I'm just dicking around and doing just random stuff. But it builds towards something that gives you a certain experience. So it looks like I'm not quite, like there's not so much going on or so much skills, because some of those skills are invisible. Like an actor, if you haven't seen that actor before, it looks like they're just going up and they're just saying the lines and they are that person. But then you see them in another movie when they're acting completely different, and you go, oh, that was a skill I was watching.
Right.
But those are invisible skills. And I guess so with all that said, it's like if we go just like practical then on, like when you're learning a new skill, so just learning a new juggling skill, it's like, how do you go about it, and how do you decide that something is worthwhile to learn, like a new skill or a new trick or whatever?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what is your driving force in that?
Exactly. Okay, so I'm totally gonna answer that. I'm going to go in a line towards that answer. Because that is a great question. That is the question. But you said something now. You said something now when you were talking, which I think I wanted to address, which was you said, skill. We could say because the audience might not understand all these transitions and all these details and all these hidden skills. Totally agree with you that they're invisible. But we can all generally agree that there's these moments when the skill becomes present, and it's the big trick. It's the four acrobats on top of each other, and it's very clear. And so I have two ideas connected to that. The first one is that there's a trend, because me and you, we talk a lot about putting meaning into technique. What can technique mean?
Yeah.
That was a lot. That was like the whole reflex show we did was exactly that process. And I had one observation, which was looking around the circus world, and we could say, I hate to say it, but like more the contemporary circus world, whatever that word means. But that market, let's not get into the abstract, but like the market of selling circus, the label of contemporary circus as a market. You get this circus with these stories slapped on top, I'll say, and slapped is definitely a judgment, and out of my opinion, it's gratuitously slapped on top. And I just want to say this: I go to watch a lot of these shows, and audience loves them, but dude, the thing they love is the skill. Nobody's walking away from the show being like, as the first statement out of their mouth, nobody's walking away saying, oh my goodness, their portrayal of refugees was so incredible. I'm sorry, that's not the first thing out of their mouth. It could be the second thing out of their mouth. The first thing out of their mouth is, I can't believe what they did. I can't believe when they did the four people standing on top of each other. I went to see a contemporary circus combined with an opera a couple years ago. I went to see the show, and it was an incredible opera. I mean, on its own. I mean, the opera music and the composer it was beyond. I mean, you want to talk about skill or hidden skill, like it was beyond reality. But in the middle of the opera, they're doing like teeterboard, like acrobats doing teeterboard. And it's just too powerful. The technique is too powerful. It overpowers. You can't be human and watch that and not just be like, oh my goodness, they're going to die. Oh, he did a flip. Oh, she did a double flip. Oh, they did the big high jump, the big push, and they do the triple flip.
Yeah.
And it overpowered, like, and so I was watching this opera, which is the opera crowd, which is very high cultured, snobby, all those stereotypes. And then, where you can't, I don't know if you go to see a lot of classical music, they have cough drops in a big bowl when you walk in the room, right? In the theater, because the audience can't cough. Oh, don't cough during the show because it's going to ruin, right? And now you got teeterboard going on in the middle of an opera, and people are just clapping, almost giving a standing ovation. They're not clapping for the music. They're not clapping for the theme of that opera. In that moment, they're clapping because there's a human in front of them doing impossible things that they can't but help, connect to. So this idea of I just want to point that out. This idea of what is a skill, we definitely know it when we see it. In fact, maybe to the point where we can't help it. We can't help but to have a big connection to it, right? And so all these shows that are kind of saying, well, we're doing a show about X, Y, and Z, but then in the show you have these skills, you have to recognize that these skills are powerful and they have an effect on an audience, whether you want them, you get what I'm saying? Like if your main intention is like to do a show about global warming, and that's the message you want to portray, you have to understand if you do 4 backflips and land on your head in a glass jar, that's what people are going to talk about. You have to understand that, right? And so that's just one thing to recognize about the skill that's happening around us today. And so then I wanted to get into the second thing, and then I'll answer your question. Sorry, but like,
but just I thought there, just this thing of skills, which I think is really interesting, is that when somebody does something that's that kind of skill, to me, it brings you, it's so real that it sets up its own level of reality, which feels like this is the most real that it could possibly get. And if you do that in a show like in an opera, I would imagine that the carefully crafted suspension of disbelief that has been showing that people aren't talking, they're singing, people are being so artificial, and then all of a sudden, like artificial in the best of ways, like it becomes transcendent. And it makes you think the biggest thoughts that mankind can think, or humankind can think.
Yes.
But then the skills comes in, and you are brought in right into the moment, and you just go, "Oh my God, look at that!" Yeah, and that this has, to me, like I sometimes express this, that skills and mastery, it has its own level of truth. It has its own truth, which is kind of separate to the truth that just talking has, or doing acting or whatever. And if you do a very difficult thing, a very difficult skill, at the end of it, you have a certain authenticity from it. And if you're good at have you thought it through, and then it can lend credibility to who you are as an authentic person. Not everybody can take that and ratchet it up to then be able to say, this is what's going on with war. This is why war, or whatever. But I think that the potential is there, and this is basically all the work that we did on Reflex. It's like, how do you actually match meaning beyond the tricks, so that neither of those two things stand out, but that the show is hitting you both on a level of meaning and on a level of tricks. So we don't have to go fully into that. We've talked about that a bit before, or whatever. But I do think that this thing of like skills, there's as one defining thing about it, as like you can talk about what kind of skill, you break it down into time, but it also brings you as an experiencer right into the here and now. And it's almost like you experience that so that you still remember the flow of what came before, and you have certain anticipation of what's going to come in the future, but you are essentially really caught in the moment or so, as well as you are also impressed. I think it's almost a fundamental human feature that we are impressed by things that are done well. What they are. So there was just an interjection to comment on what just before you go.
No, that was perfect, because it's the perfect segue into what I was going to say next. And thanks for, I mean, you're absolutely 1,000% right. That the skill in that opera was taking us out of that moment, for better or worse. I mean, it was a great experience to see the acrobatics, but it did take you out of the suspension of disbelief of that opera for that moment in time, and you can't escape that suspension of disbelief. Or whatever. And we'll have to get back to this idea about being in. What's that?
It's like you're caught in the story of the opera and caught in the aesthetics of the opera, and then circus comes, and it's forced to be doing this all the time. Up, down, and it stops being like, hey, should we go over here? And I'm singing this song to this beautiful woman over here, and then this guy's gonna go, and then for a while, tang, 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 flip, flip, and this is just lasting, and the story has stopped, unless of course they're watching the. Anyway, we don't have. I don't
exactly. No, that's perfectly great to say. It's not an impossible task, but it's certainly really hard.
It's like his Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead in Hamlet, you know. Or like that movie, they're seen from the point of views of there's some actors who come to play within the play. You could potentially think, I don't know which opera it was, but that they were watching some sort of that's in. No,
totally, you're totally right.
Get pulled into this thing, but maybe that is the experience that the characters on stage were like, they were so pulled into the circus that they made these strange decisions after they've seen it.
That is the usual solution. That's also not easy, but it is kind of the more straightforward one. That inside your theatrical framework, with your suspension of disbelief, those characters in the fantasy land go see a circus or a fantasy performer. That is then the motivation, that you can get away while keeping the suspension of disbelief and having these real moments in real life. It's also kind of a meta cop-out cheat sometimes. Motorcycle. That doesn't fit sometimes. But
That's right. It's like a level 1 entry thing. You put it
Yeah.
in, you're going, I don't know how it's going to fit, so let's just pretend they go to the circus, and then we have a snippet of this act or whatever, and then we go on with the story. Yeah.
But we have to get back later to this idea of being impressed, because I have a huge question for you about that. So we save that for a second, but just to make a note. But let's say we're working with skills that aren't like doing teeterboard or 4-person high towers or triple backflips or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's I don't deal with those kind of visceral skills. I'm doing juggling, so it's just physically smaller, much less risky. I mean, there's no risk in juggling compared to like doing the 4 backflips or whatever. So then now maybe you caught me at a bad time in my life to have this conversation because you're stuck with my current like thought process that I'm obsessed with. And we talked about it a little bit last time, which was I call it rhythm and you call it structure. And so I'm pretty convinced that right now in my life that in terms of importance of big skills, we can say, like we've been talking about now, like at the opera or whatever, the circus and the opera, I think I can kind of get away with changing the skills where I put them in a performance, not just completely arbitrarily, but much more than when I was younger, just because I know the rhythm of the piece. I know the flow. I know the expectation that I'm setting up. And so what I mean is I don't have to do my biggest trick at the biggest moment necessarily, because the biggest moment isn't necessarily depending on that specific trick. Man, this is such a circular thing to have to try to.
It's really good. It's really good. Yeah.
So basically, I can get to a high point, maybe not the high point of a flow, but I can get to a high point, and I can do a very small piece of technique, and it can still be very effective because I'm aware of the larger structure. I'm aware of the larger thing that's going on, and in that way, I think tricks have become less important. I mean, I don't know. I guess Eric and I went on, or maybe I went on the object episodes at one point about the death of a trick. And I really believe tricks are dead. I mean, because anything can be a trick now. Like quite literally by definition, juggling is not defined by technique. Juggling is defined by context. And that's not just an academic funny thought. That's like Eric and I lived this in our careers. So, and you've seen it. So it's like this idea that a specific trick, I mean, it would be fun to make an act that has those specific tricks in those specific places that they can't be interchanged. But that's not what we're working on these days generally. That's not what we're doing as a collective, at least in terms of a culture of performing and doing circus and stuff. For example, let me give an example. This is all very academic. I'll give an example. You know, back in the day, there was a person who used to do pirouettes with juggling. There was like one person who did that. Why did they do it? They got paid. They got hired because they did pirouettes. That doesn't happen now. We don't build our careers like that anymore. Our careers are based on something else. Most likely how you perform, your character. Do you talk? Are you funny? Are you doing crazy acrobatics in terms of like I don't mean crazy in terms of, I mean, I'm for sure you can find exceptions to these rules. You can find, I mean, crazy acrobatics in terms of like with the juggling, that you have a unique style. You said style earlier, right, on this discussion today. And so it's more about the style. I mean, you can still find places in the world where at least on the surface, the rumor is you get hired because you do a certain trick. Like I knew quite recently in Germany and a couple of the varieties, this one guy was working because he juggled 9 balls. And I know there was a guy who was hired a couple years ago who did 11 rings, you know. But like, that's really far and few between. That's not how people are working these days. That's not how I've worked my entire life. Nobody has hired me because I did a certain trick, unfortunately. But just to say, when you compose something these days, I mean, I don't mean to say that your technique is meaningless and just interchangeable like Lego bricks. But what I mean is we're working on a different level, right? We're working on a different level of detail. And I mean, at least in my life, I would love to make that work where it's so drilled down to the smallest level of detail that if I do one trick and I switch it with another, the whole thing falls apart. Or if I do one extra catch, or one too few catches, the whole piece is just ruined. And if I do it correctly, you leap to your feet and you applaud and you cry and laugh all at the same time, right? We're not working on that level of detail these days. So in terms of what is a skill and what's the impact of the skill, I'm not sure, at least with my juggling, that it's necessarily about the biggest trick or the hardest trick. It's more about the overall awareness of how you craft and compose that expectation to the audience of what's going to happen next. Many times it's about surprise, and that's a skill, again, one of your hidden skills that you use in your work just like perfectly. This idea, this element of surprise, of subverting expectations. Maybe that's what makes a career these days. Instead of basing, I'm going to hire you because you can you're the first person to juggle, 5 rings and do a series of tricks with them, which was Sergei Ignatov. And he gets hired because he's the first person doing this thing. And the market values people who do things for the first time with technique. We can talk about it today. We try to differentiate ourselves from other people to be unique, to stand out in the market. And we also have this long history of circus and performing, which is where we all come from, which is where this all started. So, of course, we still talk about, I have this trick and you have that trick. But in reality, if we're talking about like what pays the bills, it's not that, right? That's more about our egos and our place in the culture. Nothing wrong with that. But, there's a bunch of different levels of the discussion just to be aware of here. Yeah, and so this idea that I can make a performance that's successful, and it's not about the big trick at the big time. It's about doing the overall structure correctly and the overall rhythm of the visual.
Yeah, but it is also, like you said, it's not about, nobody will recognize if you go on, and then he catches every second club by the head and every second by the handle, and then he goes, and then on the last one, they all go tack, 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 and then we do, and 1, 2, 3. And to me, it was like if we make a sort of music analogy, people will immediately be aware if you played a G where it was supposed to be an F sharp, then you can hear it. Like you go, that was discordant. Like if you're playing something classical, like you're playing Bach, and then all of a sudden discordant chords comes, and you go, that didn't happen unless there was a mistake until hundreds of years later or whatever. I don't know when that first got brought in with Bela Bartok. I don't know who it was that first did that sort of stuff. Started bringing it into classical music with discord, like Stravinsky maybe with the Firebird or whatever, where there was a riot because people going, this is so discordant, we don't know what to do, we get mad, because it was the first time they heard it. But maybe there's something there like that. The juggling it's not as recognizable yet as a language. Like musical language is the thing. It's not words, but especially if you play a song that they might know, or even music in the style that they already know, that if you play something else, they'll be able to go, what's going on here? And you're going, is this some sort of fusion or whatever? Whilst very few people would go, look, it's a gentleman juggler, but wow, that was an interesting flow. That was very modern. People don't necessarily think that these days. So I don't know if that's but it also that thing you say that you can craft pieces in a different way now. And I was thinking of that as it's like when my good friend Hamish McCormick's dad does Kung Fu. And I remember he was the one that talked about this thing that in the beginning, you got to just learn the forms of Kung Fu. And there is 89 or 6 or whatever forms, these shapes that you do. And then you have to do them 10,000 times. And then they sit in you. And in the beginning, that's what you do. But then after that, once you've mastered those forms, then any one of them can flow into any other bit in any chip-chopped way that it has done before. And that is what happens in the beginning. You have to learn the form, and then you can break the form, but only because you truly understand and have mastered that form or that sort of structure or that rhythm. So you now, as a juggler, for 30 years or whatever, you now know you can do different things because you're building certain expectations with what you do. But also what I'm saying, so you're building a certain rhythm, and you're building it towards something. So when you do a certain trick, whether it is to music or you're doing it without music, is neither here nor there, but you're building an expectation or something in the audience. So when it's building towards, like you say, a high point, and then you can do something beautiful and little or funny, or you can do something big and impressive, but you can choose that out of a different structure. So to that, I'm going like, it's a little bit like music, but you are freer within the patterns of what you do than you are within the 4/4 beats of a song, 3/4.
Yeah, I mean, that's the blessing and the curse. I mean, that's the blessing part of it. The curse is that, yeah, people don't know, for example, juggling technique at all. Like, they have no expectation of it. So they can't really, sing along. Like, when you start doing your hat routine and they're like, oh, Frodo's going to do that sequence where it goes under the leg, behind the back, over the shoulder. Oh my goodness. That's like my favorite. That's my favorite visual.
And I loved it when Jay did that. When Jay Gilligan did that at the 1989 IGA. That was great. And then when the other guy did it, dude, that's not how it works in our business. So yeah, it is. So
that's the curse. So the curse is they don't know. The curse is they're not familiar with what we're doing. But then on the other hand, it's the blessing of, like, they don't know what you're doing. You can do whatever. like you have a lot of options. Like you're not the classical violinist having to play Bach note for note, and if you play a different note, you're in trouble, right? Like, so it's good and it's bad. With that comparison, I'd much rather be a juggler than a classical violinist, because their life doesn't seem very fun as an artist, being stuck like, well, you got to play these notes in this order, and we're much more free with our skills. I mean,
I mean, it's so interesting, isn't it? I really like classical music, and I know I've gone on about that before, and he's got the connection to you with that guy Vikingur Olafsson, who is an Icelandic piano player, and he plays Bach. And some of those pieces are just absolutely transcendent to me. They are just like, I've heard this piece of music before, but when he plays it, it's something completely else. He's playing my emotions somehow there. And that's interesting when somebody does that piece, where I'm going like, I don't have that with juggling either, of course. So, but what we were I was thinking something.
You would ask me about how to learn skills, and I had a really big question for you.
Focus on it. Yes. So how do you focus on which skill that you learn? And here in this, when the skill is so it's a little bit nebulous, but in the moment of when you do it, or even if you create an act to music where you're still doing that thing where you're shaping the physical expression of the juggling tricks, there, to me, I always go back to, what do I want the audience to feel in this moment or whatever. So the way that I've structured my hat act with the cane, it has all these repetitious kind of things, and which I think of as narrative elements to it. We don't have to go into that, but that's like, I use that as a sort of barometer. I'm going, well, for me to make a 5-minute juggling act, which is a long time, I need to have different rhythms within this structure. So there's sections, like first I just do hat, then I do cane for a while just with a hat on the head, and then I do cane and then hat at the same time. But in there, I break it with very more performative kind of ways of doing some of the tricks. So that sort of breaks up the routine. But a lot of that has to do with me feeling like, if I introduce these kinds of elements, like when I'm going to throw, I have the stick behind my back, I got the hat on the stick, and I'm mentioning this because I got you on it. And I'm like, my favorite
part, yeah.
Because I'm clear now for the audience and everyone that I'm going to throw it up. I'm in an awkward position. I'm going to throw it up onto the head, and I just quickly change my grip on the stick a little bit on the cane, and then I adjust it just to get a better thing, and then I adjust it again a bit further, and in this moment with my hand behind my back, and then lift the hat up and put it on my head with the stick without throwing it at all. And you thought that was funny because it really subverted what you thought was going to happen.
And it's the classic 1, 2, 3. It's like, fix it once, fix it twice, and then the third,
something else happens. So it's a visual joke. It's a surprise, and I do that if everything goes the way I hope it does. I did do that 3 times in the act. So that, and this is like, to me, like, this is a bit of narrative in there, and I put that in there because I know, and that's also because it was the start of my family show. I know when I do that, and I actually play the moment, and I put it on, then I get a completely different reaction than that I did something impressive or something difficult.
Right. Well, man, there's so many.
You approach that.
Yeah, there's so many things to say here. A couple things to notice. You know, you and I, we talk about the same thing many times, and we have different words for it in our world. And I just noticed one difference now, which really kind of makes me ashamed. No, because I say rhythm and you say structure, but you say every moment in the performance, I want to think, what are they going to feel? Mm-hmm. And my word for that is, what do I want them to see? We're talking about the same thing, but I'm a juggler, so I think visually. So my whole life, I've always been like, what do I want the audience to see in this moment? But damn it, Frodo, you win. I mean, of course it's what do I want them to feel? I don't want them to see just to see, like remove. I want them to see so they can feel. And I think words have power, so I think I should start changing what I say and when I make stuff and see if that makes a difference in my life. I mean, it just occurred to me right now listening to you talk. I do think of that. It's like, okay, I'm going to make a new thing now. What should come next? What do I want? What do I want this to look like? What do I want the audience to see? But how stupid of me. Of course I should say, like, what do I want them to feel? Like, that's the whole point of why we're there. But anyway.
That is also the one more level, because first you sort of, sometimes it's the other way. Like sometimes it starts with the trick and then you go like, how does this happen? Like, do we introduce element or do we introduce so emotion? They will get emotions, but the question is always, did you take the emotions into like, did you anticipate it, or did you even think that I want them to be particularly confused at this moment, so that when it all of a sudden starts to go rhythmical again, after it's been all disjumbled, and then all of a sudden it comes back into rhythm and it fits with the music and it fits with everything, then you go, oh wow, this sense of coming together or whatever. I don't know.
But that's such a that's one thing I noticed about me and you. Maybe that's why we work well together. We have these opposite approaches to the same thing. You are so much more into the overall effect and the overall structure. It's kind of you start with like the really big picture of like being really aware of like where you want it to go, and then sometimes the details they're really just serving that higher overarching idea. Whereas
like the opening of my act, which was a trick that I didn't really know how to do, that I just needed to get that into the other.
Sure.
And I'm like, in my head, the act hasn't really started yet, and I'm given the impression of that. So I'm doing this wobbly thing here, and then I'll learn it as I go along.
No, totally.
It's actually a terrible thing to do in the beginning of an act,
Yes,
I'm doing this thing, the pointing of the finger now, and I'm really gelling on it, and I had to cut out material because I'm so into this thing now.
That's good. No, but I think so. I mean, my approach is to do the opposite, right? Like I start inside with little details, and I start to try to find where is it going to go. And of course, I have enough experience to know that there's going to be a bigger picture built later on. I trust that process. But I think out of the two, I mean, maybe it's always grass is always greener, but I look to your process and I really admire. Like I really think it's maybe a bit better to start with the overall goal, because in the end, that's what you're left with is the overall impression. I mean, you can't escape that. Nobody's going to go very rarely. No. I would say this. Nobody's going to walk away from a show being like, man, I hated that show. But when they caught the hat behind their back, that was such a beautiful moment. This is because that's not how we talk. That's not how we talk about work. That's not how we experience work generally. We're not used to doing that. It's kind of like the overall experience is very powerful. So we can walk away saying, man, I had the best time tonight watching Frodo. But it's very rare you're going to walk away and be like, man, I hated Frodo's show, but when he caught the hat behind his back in that little particular way, I'm so happy. Like that, right?
Well, that was also what we did. The approach that we took then on Reflex. We talked first about bigger things that we wanted to achieve with the show. I know that is my approach when I'm working with different people as well. It's like to get an overview of what would you like this show to be, and that's always then mixed up with, because we are circus people are in general, we are connected very deeply to skills of some sort, tricks or material that in one way or the other is impressive or dangerous or emotional, or like it's got some sort of angle to it. So it's invariably what we want the show to do, because sometimes when you go, what do you want the show to do, like what are your themes or so on, sometimes people might say, oh, I want to catch the hat in a very particular way behind my back,
Right.
And then you can go, this really is what you want, then we got to work backward from that. If that's what you want to sit with, then you can do that. You might not want to do an hour long show about that catch, but in a sequence or in an act or whatever, maybe
right on.
that moment could be the
Cool.
things could watch there. But it's always good to kind of start, like, do you want to say something about refugees, or like, not to ask that question, but if you do have issues that you genuinely think about or whatever, something that you are actually
want to
so
express,
interested in, or that you feel so strongly that you think that you might have something to say about it, then just haven't had the conversation about that initially beforehand, because everything that we say in the beginning of a routine, in the beginning of an artistic process, when I'm going to create something with someone, you set up these things, and then a lot of the time I'm meeting these people for the first time, or at least having the first sort of proper creation with them, and then they say what they're going to do. Maybe they sent me a video of some of the stuff that they do, so I know, well, some of these things will be in it, but then everything that they say now is triggered in me, and I'm always I'm looking for connections, for things to connect those things to anything that they see or do that lies now hopefully hair triggered in me. So when I see something or think something, or they say something that reflects something, I go, oh, it's connected to this, and then go, oh, and now you start to weave it into a web or whatever. Yeah. But then at some point you get down to, well, questions invariably come. You have to now catch it behind your back, and then you turn around like this, because that is the finite moments. But you start a little bit big, because if you start in just the throws, you can get lost in the way you're going.
Yeah, I mean, so then to speak really technically then about those skills, there's a couple of things in my world that I could tell you about. That's kind of fun, maybe for you. I hope to hear. One is that you can either do like, well, there's also, okay, so hey, what skills am I going to do in this hat and cane act or whatever, right? And one way to approach it is you can do the laundry list. I call it the laundry list, right? And it's like, you know, kind of the general world, or I know the kind of general world of skills that I live in. You can balance stuff, you can roll stuff, you can bounce stuff. I mean, Frodo, we made lists. I mean, we have lists, man, here's the 9 thing you can do. Here's the 9 things you can do with a ball. You know, it's like you can throw it, bounce it, roll it, pinch it, trap it, place it, you know, whatever, right? Like I don't have them in my head, but I have them written down. So it's like this world of skill of just technique. It's not unknown. I mean, I kind of know the world I inhabit. So you can do like the laundry list approach, which sometimes is appropriate because if you know your larger goal, but many times people end up doing the laundry list, and I'll tell you the problem with that in a second. But basically, laundry list is like you have your bigger concepts. Did I roll the hat? Did I hit the hat? Did I kick the hat? Did I place the hat? Did I do a trap with the hat? And then you can just go down the list. That's what I call the laundry list. And you just see if any of those things are missing. And sometimes it's really good. I remember I was working in Chameleon Theater for a year with the 7 Fingers, and I did a ball and ring act that they were mixed together, balls and rings all the time. And at one point, I just needed to solve some of the rhythm problems of the act. And I thought, oh, you know what? With the rings, I never did catch one on my head yet. Oh, of course I should catch a ring on my head. That's an expectation maybe that's there. I mean, the ring can go on your head. So then I could go back to my laundry list and just kind of make sure I crossed off all the items on it. But the danger with the laundry list is that those techniques aren't always cohesive or coherent. In the way that I describe jugglers today, you'll see these YouTube videos where they're doing these not even edits of tricks, because I like edits of tricks, like one trick cut. That's fun for me as a juggler. Seeing new tricks, you know, that's fine. But in terms of a performance, a sequence for a live audience, you'll get these laundry lists acts where in the first moment the trick I watch the trick and I go, who's this person I'm watching? Oh, I get it. They're going to do tricks that are going to take, that are very hard for them to do. And I should be impressed because they didn't mess it up. That's what I'm going to watch now. And they do the first trick. I see the first trick and I think this. And I go, cool, I know what I'm watching now. And then in the next trick they do, it's not hard for them to do at all, but rather it's maybe supposed to look pretty. And then I go, oh, I get it now. This person's not doing hard tricks. They're doing stuff that's going to look aesthetically pleasing. Cool. I can't wait to see the rest of this act. And then the third trick they do, it doesn't look good and it's not hard for them to do, but it's maybe something I've never seen before. It's very original. And then I go, oh, I get it now. This person's going to do a whole act of things like, and then by that time I'm completely confused and I'm just bored because I can't follow what's happening, right? So this idea of a laundry list, you have to make sure you can't just blindly. So maybe you have different lists, right?
Right. You can't just write the best words, even if you know the best words and you have the best words.
Right.
They got to be placed in a very specific order because it's not just about having the best words. I
get so confused by jugglers today. I mean, my favorite example to be concrete is, hula hoop jugglers or hoop jugglers. So, or flow artists who use hula hoops or hoops, whatever you want, whatever language you want to use. I love it. They'll do like a skill where they'll like do 5, like everybody's doing 5 hoops these days. It's like super cool to do. And then in the next moment, they isolate the hoop, right?
Yeah.
You've seen that. It's like their hand moves, but the hoop doesn't move. And I'm just like, hang on a second. If that hoop doesn't move, just like 30 seconds ago, you were throwing it in the air. Like what caused it to not move now? And how come it, and then in the next moment, they balance the hoop. And I'm like, what happened to you moving your hand and it doesn't move, but you put it to your head? Like it drives me nuts, to be honest, because I can't follow the narrative of the skill or the composition.
So that's you're also then using these terms that I always use because it's like, oh, this is part of the narrative or what's the story we're doing here.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a good story, but you have to have a sort of story in your head as to what it is that you do.
Or you have to,
like if you go one isolation trick or whatever that's called when it's just floating in the space, and then you do 5 balls, and then you blow 4 soap bubbles with a pipe, and then you go, okay, this is not hanging together. It's a sequence, because that's the other sort of question. It's like when you then, so this has to do with style. Like you can, if you have a very nice style that has a nice flow to it, then it can make sense in itself. You say, okay, that's why they're doing it like this, or that they've grouped the rings are stuck and then eventually they come unstuck and go flowing. So then you have like some sort of structure or whatever.
I mean, even your
ask you like going, how do you string these things together? Because I know that like I could ask you, do you just stick one thing after the next? That's what's called a laundry list. I've already got that as an answer. You can't just do that. You have to do something more. And do you have any kind of criteria or any ideas around that?
Totally. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, really quick though, just to say, in your little example you just made up now, it was great actually, because you juggle 5 balls and then one hoop is stuck and then you blow 4 bubbles. At least there, the narrative can be each of these objects do different things, right? Like that's an easy narrative. But what it comes down to me, the narrative, like you said, it doesn't have to be big or crazy or good. It just has to be there. I'm always asking myself more and more as I get older, Frodo, all the time. And I ask my students all the time, and they have no answer, and I don't have a good answer. The question is, why should you watch me? Why should you watch me do any of this? That's what I'm thinking all the time. So when I see these videos where it's this laundry list in a bad way, I'm just like, wait a second, why are you showing me this? I think that too. Why am I showing this to an audience? What do I want the audience to see? And you say, what do you want the audience to feel? It always comes down to that idea. Why are we doing this?
And it's always, it's supposed to be entertaining. And entertaining, that's the role that I'm in, because I always feel like if I'm somehow there to do art, then I can do whatever I want, and it doesn't matter what anyone feels. But if I'm there in my I never do art gigs where people pay me just to do whatever I want in a corner or whatever. It's like sometimes I feel like, oh, I wish I could just do like what some of your work is. It's like you're doing the work and you just sit there and you watch it, and it's just a flow of things. And I love some of those videos that I've seen of yours on, and seen it live too, of course. But then I feel like sometimes I'm stuck in being too concrete. But in part of this being concrete and working directly with the audience is that I am always managing and trying to make a dynamic flow of fun for them, that it's enjoyable for them. And that's like one of the things that I always have as like, whatever artful things or whatever meaningful things I want to say always need to go through this whatever, like, limitation of it needs to be enjoyable. I can't go on too long by just leaving them to their own devices and going, here's a sequence, here's another thing, and now I'm doing this thing. You deal with it, the audience. Now you guys can just deal with what this means. Because to me, I always have the meaning and the narrative or whatever worked out beforehand.
Well, we don't have to let the definitions like hold us up here, but it is kind of fun to, I mean, without getting stuck on it. This, maybe all art is like when you tie a monetary device to buying and selling something, maybe it is all entertainment in the end. Like there could be an argument made for that. Even the most biggest exhibition at the Guggenheim or MoMA, right? Like in the end, it is about connecting somehow, and there's a monetary device that promotes that, like you connect the best, but it's all political anyway. But yeah. What I wanted to say was, I mean, that's what I think you do good, Frodo, is you bring art into entertainment. And man, now I don't want to waste the rest of our fun discussion tonight on like getting stuck on these definitions, but
we don't, because I've done 3 episodes about this.
Yeah.
Relatively of what my ideas of it are.
But anyway. I just want to say, like, the Water on Mars act in Absinthe in Las Vegas, at the end of the act, they juggle water bottles that are open with the lids off and the water splashes all over the audience. I mean, I honestly think that act in Vegas is so artistic. I think it's a piece of art, and it's living in this entertainment environment. And I can go on about that for hours, but basically just to say, when they juggle open bottles at the end of the act, from what I can tell, it comes from a deep artistic exploration of juggling objects that change as you juggle them. That's a very deep artistic idea. That was a research that we all worked on, and they did the water bottles for that. And maybe I'm totally wrong. I think it's a little bit connected to a thing that Patrick Elmner did. He had juggling balls filled with water with a little pinprick in it, and he juggled 5. So at the start of the juggling, the 5 balls is just like normal. It looked like 5 balls. Who cares, right? Then all of a sudden, like halfway through, they start to wobble a little bit because the water is becoming, erratic. And at the end of it, the water is almost gone. So the shells, they're just empty plastic shells, which, don't really work to throw. They don't have any velocity. So the pattern just explodes. So that's a pretty deep artistic idea. But now it's translated into open water bottles on a stage twice a night in Vegas. And it's very entertaining, but
that's a great example of taking, because my 3 episodes basically also go like, it talks about what is art and entertainment, and then what I do is the art of entertainment. It's like I have it through the prism or the constriction of keeping things entertainment, which basically means it's enjoyable for the audience, that they're taken along and they easily pay attention to the act because they're just drawn to the next thing. But you can introduce artistic concepts in here, and to not do a shell which changes over time, over 4 minutes. When you juggle it, exactly. In the end falls apart. To use the water bottle, it's a little bit like squeeze through a tennis racket, because it's an object that people somehow know, and it's
Absolutely.
better than metal hoops. You do these, you do then artistic concepts, and then it's entertaining and enjoyable. Yet when people sort of approach you, they sometimes then go, this is just not enough. We need some real art here. And you're going, what I do is actually deep. It's just,
that's the thing.
You're being confused because you're having fun.
Exactly. Yeah. This idea that it's actually deep. Let me just clarify. I mean, I just to follow that example on very concretely, it's that I don't think anybody sat down and said, okay, Water on Mars, Las Vegas, we need a crazy ending. Like, what's the craziest thing we can think of? That wasn't the process. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that process, but I don't think that water bottles came from that sort of process. The water bottles came from juggling pieces of dough and pieces of clay and balls with strings that fall apart and like whatever else we tried, whatever. I mean, the toilet paper, they juggle toilet paper rolls as well. They're also objects that change over time as you juggle them. Through the juggling destroys itself. I mean, that's a super deep thing. And it's totally cool if me and you sit down and say, hey, Frodo, let's make a list of 20 things that are this craziest juggling we can think of. Yeah, that might be a fun task, and we might think of a good idea. Off the top of my head, I've tried to do stuff like that in my life. It's actually much easier to do the artistic process of having these larger concepts, like you say, a larger goal, objects that fall apart or change, that the juggling destroys itself. I think that's such a, like a crazier idea, actually, in the end. Anyway, I didn't want to get stuck on that, but I wanted to answer your question about what comes next and to know what comes next in the piece, or how to put the skills together. And so if you don't do the laundry list, there's another approach, which is basically this laundry list idea is like you kind of tick off all the larger concepts that you haven't left any out, right? You're being complete. You're completing all the things. But the other way you can do it is really dig down into one technique. So one style, one little area of the skill, the pool, the world of the skills. So balancing, for example. Okay, I'm going to do a 5-minute act with a hat and a cane, but it's only going to be balancing. So I'm going to drill down into balancing, right? So it's the opposite of the laundry list.
Yeah.
But either way of those two approaches, which I kind of see there's those two approaches in my world. You're always stuck with this question, which I can never answer. And I want to know what you think about it, which is whenever I make something that involves a new skill, I always come to a point where I go, okay, the next thing I should do in this act or this thing I'm making is I should, balance 5 hats on top of my foot or whatever, right? And I can't do that yet. So and then I go, well, how long is it going to take me to learn to balance those hats? Probably about 6 months. And then I go, okay, so is it a good idea to take 6 months to learn that? Is it going to make that part of the act really good? Or if I spend 6 months to balance those hats, and then I look at it in the video and I go, oh, that was terrible. And so what you try to do is you try to have this process, right, where you try to assess the value of your composition of the moment of like, well, this is a good idea or this is a bad idea without being able to do the skill yet. And man, what a wild ride. I mean, how do you? I don't think there's one steadfast rule, but I guess more often than not in my life, I've kind of avoided the problem. I've just like diverted the situation. In some way or another, like I've just cheated the question by not confronting it because I just don't know what to say. I mean, you can try to watch it on video and you fail at the trick and you go, that act really looks bad. You go, yeah, well, I dropped all the tricks. Imagine if I caught all the tricks, and you just can't imagine that. At the same time, if you imagine I catch all the tricks, it still could be a bad act. So it's such a weird process that I haven't really consciously articulated yet, which would be fun if I did. But how do you deal with that kind of moment?
Well, one of the things that I thought about this act was that, well, if I learn how to throw the hat onto the stick, then I have a kind of finale moment. And then you were like going, well, how was it when you did perform that? And I'm going, well, people liked it. They liked it a lot. And it feels like, and then when I showed it to you, even how that was very intimidating for me to show you some juggling. So even though, but of course you can see through whatever, but then you go, oh, I see now why that works. And it's the way the music is, and it is the way that it repeats, and it's the first combination trick that I do, and I haven't balanced anything like that before. So just the balance on the chin, where I lift it up with a finger, put it on, and lift it now, and now I take the hat off, and then you get this anticipatory thing. You're going, oh, it's going to throw it onto the stick or whatever. And I say in the quiet of the music, I go, one more very difficult combination trick. I don't always get it, but this is amazing. And then I do it, and it makes sense at the end there. And that made me, when I had that idea, I thought, okay, well, if I do that and I do a bunch of the other stuff first, do hat first and then some hat and cane, and then end it with that will feel like an exclamation point or so, because it's the most fused way I use the stick and the hat. Because previously I have all of it, I'm only manipulating the hat with my hands, and I'm manipulating the cane, and it's sort of going in and so that's a different image and everything. So I thought that, and then decided to learn it. I'm going to learn that skill and spend some considerable time learning how to do that, and then it worked. So I did it because I thought that structurally I would be able to sell that as like a big image with the arms out, and you're standing there and you're holding it off, and the music has this lovely little bit in the end, which I can then, if I miss 3 times, the music will still fit. So I have some leeway, and I have a couple of different endings that are subtly different that will make them feel like it happened right on the cue of the music. So there, I just thought this structure will feel to them like it's complete. And then just to top that off, the whole time the cane that I'm using is a disappearing cane. So the idea is that at the end there, the hat drops onto my head, and then I take the cane and, in a magic way, throw it up into the air, and the cane disappears, and it's just a rainfall of confetti, and then that's the end, and it's just me with a hat on. So I thought, if I get all that happening, then we got ourselves a sweet act, because I think I know that when I do that stuff, then they would like it. And this then brings me to this, all that other stuff in the beginning, because I always think in these big pictures and stuff, which when I was directing Club Swizzle, every now and then I'd say to the boys, when I was working with the guys who were doing became the backbone of the show or whatever, acrobats, and I'm like going, well, you have to remember that the skills is the filler. Like, what is it that we really want to do here? We're connecting the 4 of you. You're going to carry the whole show. You're going to do your skills. You're going to be on the teeter board. And they're like, well, should I do this trick first or should I do that trick there? I don't know. But that trick needs to be more in the beginning, I think. And this trick needs to be more in the end. Like, but, I can also get involved in doing the one. But there was just such a big scope of what I needed to put my attention to. Yeah. Like, you guys just need to do this, and then you solve some of the small things, and then I'll look at it, and you think in bigger things. So it's always that. Is that you zoom in right on here, or do you go bigger? And I'm going, in a certain extent, then in that context, I remember saying skills is filler, and that they thought that was very funny.
Totally. No, I get what you mean, and I get why it's also funny. I mean, but that was a great tactic you just said. Constantly zooming in and zooming out. I think that's what we're stuck with for now, in terms of this idea of judging technique before we've learned it. But I've been doing something for the past few years, probably since I've been a father, for the past 6 years. I did this technique a little bit for reflex, and I think it's hilarious. It still feels like I'm cheating, but maybe the more I think about it, maybe it is quite clever. Because what I like to do is I use video. I film things, and then I cut it together in the movie editor. And so, for example, what you could have done, Frodo, is before you learned how to flip a hat up into a cane balance, you could have found someone else doing a video of that online, ripped the video. You could have filmed your routine up until then, and then clipped that on the end. And you could look at that. You could step back you could zoom out, right? And you could say, oh yeah, flipping that hat up there, that's the perfect ending to this thing I want to do. I'm going to invest a year into learning that trick, Or maybe you clip that video on the end and you go, oh, actually flipping the hat up at the end, it doesn't really justify 5 minutes of hats before that. So, let me go back to the drawing board, right? Like, and so what I've been doing lately on a bunch of my pieces, like for Reflex and some other shows, is I have a very limited time to create nowadays because I'm a father. And so, my free time is non-existent. So what I've been doing is filming the raw material for like the skills, just individual tricks even. and I'll start to make an arrangement of the video clips by the start and the stop of each clip. So really basically like, oh, in this clip, I start with 2 balls in this hand and 1 in this hand, you know? And then I start to arrange the clips in the video editor according to where the props are organized, just like arbitrarily, but so that they match up logistically. But then it's like you know, like you said, even on the teeterboard thing with Club Swizzle, you start to have a feeling this trick is more for the end, this trick is more for the beginning. But it may be in between. The other tricks don't really matter as much, right? So those can be arranged arbitrarily by the logistics. And in the end, I think that sounds so utilitarian and heartless and soulless and not artistic and not entertaining. But just to say, if we just think about skill and physicality for a second, arranging things, especially with juggling by logistics, is not a bad idea. So you're not constantly like, oh, the ball's in the wrong hand, I got to make a little transition to go to the other hand. And then you kind of start to cut out all the fat. You really trim down your sequences so they're really streamlined, I think in a good way, because this idea, there is a physical reality to what we're doing with our props or our bodies, you know? And so if you were just telling me earlier today, you have a transition in your show right now that you're in where you have to bring the big podium on and off, right? I mean, that's a logistical problem with a prop. So this idea of editing in a timeline according to logistics isn't the worst place in the world to start, because in the end, you want to have that kind of cohesiveness of the physical structure. So I've been trying to edit a lot of stuff in the video editor, both in terms of the minute skill, like trick by trick, but also like with Reflex, right? We did a couple of remixes. I think I sent them to you. I didn't send them to Josh and Lindsay, but a couple of remixes of the entire format of an 1.5 hour long show, because I hate, like when I was doing Reflex in terms of skill, it was just physical work. It was like, hey, Frodo, the show's feeling it's like dragging a little bit 3/4 of the way through. I was thinking if I would change this 1 2-minute bit with this other 1 minute bit, it might make it feel faster. And the only way to test that is to run a 90-minute show. And that's not a sustainable process. But you can film the show once, and it's not perfect, but you can just go in your video editor and clip those 2 routines out, switch them around, and sit back and watch and get a sensation and go, well, this is worth the effort to try and see if it really works, right? So I like zooming in and zooming out, but also this idea of maybe using a video editor to do some of the physical work for you.
Video is so good as well, because you learn so much. It's like, and I'm working on this new routine for my show Magic Act, and there too, just recording it, doing it so that I've got to learn it off by heart and then say it, and then you look at it and you go, oh well, you're always your own worst critic, or you should be, right? Or it's a good position to have, to be critical to your own work and not just think that it's magic every time. But most people are very critical to what you do, and if you then look at it and you find some stuff that you don't like, then you can fix that. And if you eventually have done that 10 times, then it should at least be 10 things that you now should maybe be able to watch a little bit. So it's a good idea to keep filming, and when it's a complex piece, you can really also putting it into iMovie or whatever and move stuff around and go, well, would this be better here or would it be better there? Or so. But this thing with the skill as well, like what we did with the Swizzle Boys in the end, whereas like we had they did the hoop diving act when and then we came up with this idea. I don't know if it was Joran or whatever somebody had this idea that we're going to do the hoop. So we rigged it up on basically just like a hula hoop or whatever, rigged it up on magnets so that it could swing back and forth. So it was a heavy kind of hoop, and then they did the hoop diving through this, and then towards the end it was just basically doing Joran Dawson was doing like a whatever, I don't know what the technical term is, but some sort of round off a flip so that he ends up jumping through it with his bum first. But with the swinging hoop, this was a bit, it took a bit to get used to, but in the moment of when they were doing it, I was like, this is it. this is the finale. And they're like, oh, but it's just that trick. And I go, no, but we build it like this. And then we had a Chinese pole at one end. And I go, get both of you two guys to climb up. And then we have the third guy lifts the hoop up to the two guys who are now hanging on the pole. They go, yeah, but we don't need to be. I know, but do it. And go there, and then you drop it. And then the first time we did it, then they didn't make it on the first go. And this was in maybe on the pre-premiere, first preview or whatever. Yeah. And then just went back to doing it normal and didn't climb up. And I came up and it's like tearing my hair out, which is why I'm bald. And I'm going up and saying, no, you have to stick to the thing. You that's how that trick is done. Yeah, but it takes so long. And then we did it. And then by the time when they did it on opening night, and it still ended up taking like 3 or even 4 goes. But what we created with that moment where the two guys are up and another guy is taking up and the fourth guy is running to do the flip, it was that we created what I felt was like a sports moment where you do these flips and flops and whatever, and it's amazing, and they jump through and they dive and it's cool choreography and whatever. But that last thing, they failed. Then they failed again, and then they failed one more time, and now it's not funny anymore. Now you really feel like it's each time it takes the time to set it up, and the audience is so invested, and you feel like you're watching somebody jumping the 3.21 meters, which is the world record. Nobody's done this before, and it's just this thing, and it was difficult. It was not like he was pretending, although after a while I was like going, I know it's guts, but you can't get it on the first one. It's because it's too good to not get it dramaturgically. And then we sort of went, okay, well, you can miss the first one and then you try, because sometimes it would take 3 goes after that, or 4 goes or whatever. So then we did it, and we did it, and it failed. And Brett Haylock is wandering around stomping his feet, and I'm going, it's going to be good. They're going to do it. They're going to do it. They're going to do it. And he's not happy about it because it gets a little bit awkward. The tension is almost too much. And then they jump through, and the whole room jumps up into a standing ovation, going like, yeah, we just did it. It's like Norway just won the football. It's sort of feeling like.
Yeah, it's structure and rhythm. It has nothing to do with the skill. Like that was a perfect example. They're saying, no, but Frodo, we don't have to climb up the pole. Oh, we don't have to. Like, no, it's structure and rhythm. There's a bigger goal there. It's not the technical thing of just getting through the hoop with your butt first. It's not just the technical thing of catching all the things that you throw, right? There's a bigger goal at work there. And the skill can totally be the thing that they do cheer for. They're not cheering for the directing of the structure of the piece, right? They're cheering for the actual skill.
And the skill is on that level where you go, is like you're jumping backwards, and the timing's got to be right, and the hoop's got to be dropped by those people. So there is a synergy here between 4 people going at the same time, doing stuff and flips and having to be at the right place, and them having dropped it. So it's like it had all these components. And the dramaturgy of it and making it more, that was just also, it's to go, how do we give the audience the feeling like they didn't just watch a sequence of pre-rehearsed tricks, but it's like we got to this last bit in the end, and then this moment happened, and it was the end, and then they just did one last final move, and they all climbed up the pole, and they did hoppa, and or whatever, then it was, it.
I mean, Eric calls that stuff pool cleaning.
Oh yeah.
And for years I didn't know what he meant, but we would be rehearsing and he'd say, "Oh, we need some more pool cleaning here before we do the trick." And then I knew what he meant. I mean, it became a shorthand for us. I knew rhythmically we did need a little space and time before that next trick or before that finale or before the next piece or whatever. And normally the pool cleaning we do in our show is we move stuff, we clean up, literally clean up, or we bring other props out and set props. There's an importance to those moments which seem messy or frivolous or like you'd want to cut those out, right? But it gives the audience a chance to breathe and reset. But then he finally explained that the pool cleaning, one day I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, it's like when you're watching a porno and in the porn, the guy comes to clean the pool. They don't just start having sex straight away, you know? Like he has to clean the pool a little bit first, like to warm it up, you know? So
to do some acting, because he's actually an actor, but he does some porn on the side.
Yeah, so I mean that fits your Club Swizzle example perfectly. I mean it's some pool cleaning before he jumps through the hoop.
It's just 4 guys don't know what to do with themselves, and then they start swinging their rings around and they yeah.
But it's true though, right? It's a rhythm and it's a structure. Yeah. I mean, it's really important. It may be the most important thing.
Yeah.
So
although everyone's just waiting for the pool cleaning to be over so they can get to the trick. I think in a
exactly
show, they still waiting for the trick, but that build up of the trick is really good. I just think that by using the porn movie pool cleaning thing, then you just go, if I was the editor of this, I would edit out the pool cleaning. Maybe, but at least if I had the tape, I would try that and see.
Yeah, we don't know like the culture and the politics of selling porn movies. So maybe that's necessary for like the format, you know.
So we'll do some research and then we'll talk about that next time.
Like you think you would edit that out right now, but like you would try to make a porn movie without that, and you would just like you would never.
It's like then it's just people getting it on all the time, and it's like
you wouldn't sell anything. I don't know.
No, but all the time, yeah.
But to drill down really practically, I mean, maybe this is a good wrap up for this session, because then if I kind of drill down to the nuts and bolts, like really the most basic level of putting skills on stage, as kind of a whole spectrum of this whole conversation we've had today, where it's like we've had the super huge, crazy, metaphorical, conceptual talk, and now kind of going down as practically as we can. I do realize there's a couple of different ways that things go on stage, and I know that I tend towards one than the other. And so where my technique actually comes from, like let's go back to this movie editor idea. I'll go film these tricks, right? Where do the tricks come from? Well, the tricks those are arbitrary. I'll tell you that. Generally arbitrary, I'll say, but not arbitrary out of context of anything, more out of context of like the bigger goal I'm working on. They're just raw material, but they're not arbitrary in the sense that like I look at juggling all the time. I think about juggling all the time. I've been juggling all the time, and I know what tricks and techniques and ideas I want to explore. That's a separate kind of practice than creating something for stage, right? So I have a little separate practice going on in my head and in my body all the time, parallel to this other creation process, where it's like, hey, today I want to work on, like, for example, very practically, crossing balls that normally you would throw straight up and down, and you throw them straight up and down because you catch them in the same hand. But now I'm going to cross the ball, but I'm still going to catch it in the appropriate hand. Mm-hmm. And then I can take all those tricks, and that's like an exploration, and that generates what I call raw material. And then because I go, well, because to go back really far in my life, I realized when I was a teenager, there's two things going on. There's what you do and how you do it. And I'm really glad I figured that out when I was like a teenager, because I had a moment. I remember my grandfather died when I was a teenager on my mom's side. And I wanted to do like a little tribute to him for myself, just to have a process where I could think about him, like just, it'd be a nice thing to do. And I really appreciate that I did it. And when I performed it, as a side note, I didn't care that the audience knew it was about my dead grandfather, but it turned out to be a nice piece. I liked the piece, and I made some personally meaningful rules about the piece based on my relationship with him and his habits and what he used to do. That's a whole other conversation about communicating with an audience and intent and all these things for later on, right? But I was doing this piece so I made this structure, a framework of rules based upon, like, for example, my grandfather, he was funny. It got to be whenever I would go visit him, he'd always give me a $20 bill. I don't know why, but he always like do the handshake with like it palmed in his hand. It's like a $20 bill. And it kind of became a funny thing, I thought. So I was like, okay, I'm only going to do sequences of 20 throws and catches, like a bunch of sequences of 20, 20, 20, 20. Nobody has to care. You don't have to care about that when you see it. It was just a fun rule on the inside of me. I was like, oh, 20 throws and catches. That's a funny idea. Like, so I built this conceptual framework for the technique. And I did it with 5 balls at first. I was making the routine with 5 balls. And then at one point I switched to 4 clubs. I don't remember why. I mean, I was like 15 or something. And then I was like, oh my goodness, this still works. Like this framework works switching from 5 balls to 4 clubs because it's not about the prop, the number. It's like 20, 20, 20. I had a bunch of other rules too, right? But the 20, 20, 20 is easy to talk about right now. And then it hit me. I was like, oh, I can do 5 balls for this thing for my grandfather, or I can do 5 balls with this other idea for something else completely different. It's the same skill. It's the same technique, but it's how I compose it. It's how I present it. It's the context I put it in. I was like, wow. So it's not, because before that, it was really like, okay, 5 balls is 5 balls. And when I do 5 balls, it's that one thing that 5 balls is, if that makes sense. You know, like I do 5 balls, it's one dimensional, and I did the 5 balls, and then I can't do it any other way. And then it really opened my mind where I was like, oh, I can use 5 balls in any context. And then conversely, I can do the opposite. I can use any context on 5 balls. There's what you do and how you do it. So very practically these days, I have my parallel process of crossing, non-crossing throws, whatever. And then I generate raw material, but I put it into that framework. And of course, later on, it's really nice that it would be nice if the concept really does fit the technique. So maybe crossing, non-crossing isn't good for a certain part of my show, but I have an intuition for that, which I can't articulate right now, but maybe I should over the next few years as I try to explain my process to myself and to others, and to uncover these unconscious things that I've learned over 35 years. I have a process, a lot of it's internal, but very basically that's where a lot of the tricks come from. And just to wrap it up, or not to wrap this up, but just to complete my thought, the other way to do it, besides just generating, we can say random raw material, is I think they create, from what I've seen this way in France a lot, like I've done a few creations in France, and you go to these residencies, and it's really like you go into, like me and you, Frodo, we go into a room and we're like, okay, the show's going to be about stealing my hat. So I have this trick with a hat, and you have this trick with a hat. And how do we get between those two moments? Let's make something now. And it's like you generate material from the actual context of being on stage. And generally, I don't know why, I personally tend to hate that, and I never do that. But like I've seen so many shows where people just go into a room and they just go from A to B to C to D very linearly in terms of the creation. And many times the show is wonderful, don't get me wrong, but a lot of times it also sucks. I don't know, there's something that turns me off about that process and about seeing that. Sometimes I can see the show has been made like that, where it's like, okay, I'll say this last example to try to articulate what I'm saying, and then I'll shut up. It's like this. I think if you go see the Reflex show and you go home and you tell someone about the show who hasn't seen the show, and they say, what happened? I think, like, let's say they say, oh, Frodo, you saw Reflex. What happened at the start of the show? I think you could say concrete things that happened. Whereas I saw a show recently where it was clearly devised in the studio in terms of the technique and the skill from A to B to C to D, like very linearly in terms of like, give me the hat. No, you take the hat. No, I'm going to walk over there. Now you walk behind me. And we find this moment where I'm hiding and then you surprise me. And I was reflecting that, like, if you hadn't seen the show and I try to describe to you what they did, I can't tell you what they did for the first 15 minutes of the show. It's like undefinable out of the context of seeing the thing specifically, because nothing actually happens. It's all organic. I'm not doing a good job of communicating this.
No. Yeah, it's like you can feel how the show was made. Like you just go, oh, they have this bit here, and now you can feel like this bit doesn't belong in the show, or this bit is a filler. And now I see why they did that bit in the beginning, but for some reason it sticks out. Or it can also be that just makes it boring. It's like if it's predictable somehow, so that it needs to always be inevitable, but it also needs to be surprising somehow, particularly towards the end.
Well, it's also like this. Let's say I'm at a party. I'm at your party, Frodo. You're having a party. And then someone says like, oh, you have a show, like, can you do some of your show? And I say, yeah, I can explain the first part of my show to you. And then I can literally do that. Okay, I got 5 clubs and I stand here, I throw them like this and I turn and I put the ring on my head, right? And then I kick up the ball and then the lights change like this and then I turn, like there's like things happening that you can imagine me doing. Whereas this other show I saw, if they were at a party, it's like, oh, can you do the opening of your show for us? And they're like, can you explain it? And they'd be like, well, no, not really. I'd have to have my costume on. I'd have to have the lights. I'd have to have the stage set design. I'd have to have my backpack on, because otherwise, if I tell you what I'm actually doing physically, it doesn't make any sense. Because basically, I like raise my hand and then I turn and then I look.
It sounds boring or whatever.
And it's not like the show is necessarily bad, but there's something about this style of work of devising in the studio for the moment creates a different type of work where, like me and you, we're gonna go into France and have our residency and make our duo show. And we go, okay, let's start with the hat stealing moment. Okay, how are we going to get on stage? And then we take 10 minutes to get on stage. We get 10 minutes to get the hat on stage, right? Because we're working organically from, how to say, like, in the moment, as opposed to coming to the creation with a bunch of skills already in our back, like already on our back and our backbone, and a bunch of kind of parallel processes to generate material. I think there's something there I got to try to dig into in the future. This idea that you come to a creation bringing a bunch of skills and techniques and tricks with you, versus in the moment saying, okay, we're on stage, Frodo, now give me the hat. Oh, what if I take the broom and I hit it off your head? Yeah, that could work. And then we spend 3 weeks trying to, you know what I mean? And you come up with a new trick. It's a different process.
It is a different process. And it's, of course, it's like when you were talking about the other day when we were talking, it might just have been personal or whatever, but we were talking about the Nouvelle experience and how they just worked on that for 6 months or whatever every day, and from 9 in the morning till 9 at night, and everyone was working all the time because they really were looking for something new or whatever, and they needed to see it. Oh, it wasn't working because Franco Dragon was doing his thing, so he knew what he wanted when he saw it, and if he didn't see it, he didn't quite know what it was he was looking for or whatever. I don't know if that's
totally
does him justice, but you're looking for something new and you're trying to create that language. And I guess for me, most of the processes and the reason they could do that was because they had just gotten some insane amount of funding, because their previous show had been so amazing and they'd gotten more money and this was the next level, and you could go to the next level, or you could continue on traveling around in the tent and do stilt walking and whatever, or you're going to become that juggernaut that became. And they did it, and it was amazing. And I guess I'm just really in a situation where, like, even me working for so long on Reflex seemed like an extremely luxurious thing to do. And the fact that you and me were not working and we're probably needing to talk about work and to talk about what we do also for mental health reasons, or just for like being sane in the pandemic when we weren't doing shows, and all of a sudden what our work was completely had no value anymore. So with all of that, I think it felt totally luxurious to be able to go in and actually talk about what juggling was. And some of these things I knew because I'd already listened to your first season of podcasts. I'd already listened to you for 20 hours, you and Eric talk. So there was a lot of shorthand with that too. And we had so many ideas of what could be put into it. But if you start completely at scratch, it can be a really long process, and you can end up working on these tiny little details. Like I remember saying to the Swizzle boys, it's like, I knew roughly how much material we needed to make, and they never liked it. But I do this, from mine. I'm like going, okay, we've been working and they've been putting together some stuff, and I film it and I'm going, all right, so that's day one. That's good. We got 27 seconds worth of material. We're making half an hour and we only have 3 weeks, and we made, so if we follow this, we will have, I don't know what the maths is, because calculate, but it's probably only like 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of it, so we're going to run short. So something about this process of what we created today, which was valuable because we're learning to meet each other and how we work. But
Right.
then Tom is going to climb up on this thing, and I want him to stand on a board and do his flip and all that. So I'm putting a big picture together, and in that moment, we just follow his lead, and then that'll take 5 minutes because he's going to go in. You guys are going to get this thing, and you're going to put a chair on top of it, and you're going to do all this. So that'll just dictate, doesn't that'll take 5 minutes, and we'll find that 5 minutes when we go for it. So that's in the bank, because sometimes that other process is so laborious, and you can spend all this amount of time deciding, should I have my hand like this? Should I have it like that? Should we have the hands in fist? Or which shape should we have the hand when we do the present or whatever?
I'm laughing because I've done that in my life, Frodo. I
have done it too, and I've been fucking pardon the swearing there, but I've been like angry about it. It's like, oh, we have to have them like this, straight out and thumbs together, and we can't do it any other way, or else I'm going to leave this company.
Dude, Frodo, you just brought back such a memory for me. I was like 18 or 19, and I was in this company, and we were going to give a ball to each other. Like, it was like 2 people on stage, and one had to give a ball to the other person. I just remembered we did it like for 5 hours, like 5 hours rehearsal of how you can give a ball to someone. And it was really like, no, first you hold out your hand, and then I'll put it in your hand. No, wait, first I put my hand, then you put your hand, then you look at me. No, wait, you look at my hand, and then you look at the ball. And like, we were serious. We were so sincere. So yeah, I agree with you.
And at the end of that, I'm sure the audience just went like, the way that guy gave that girl that ball. Whew,
exactly.
Best of a ball I ever saw in my life. The rest of the show was a bit boring, but that bit was amazing.
Totally. No, I mean, obviously that's a terrible process, but if I try to say something good about it, the one good thing it did, made us utterly convinced that the way we were giving the ball was the right way. Like, we spent 5 hours going through every possibility, and we've chose the one we believed in the most. And then every time I went on stage and I gave the person that ball, I'm like, yes, this is how you do it.
Yeah. This is how you do it. And we know that. That's not something we just made up. We actually looked at all the options, and this is it.
No, but you bring up a good point. I mean, with the Club Swizzle, with the rehearsal time, 3 weeks. So, yeah, I don't think like bringing raw material to a project, you can also get lost in that. Like, you bring 100 tricks and you need 3. Like, it's 5 hours of giving a ball. Like, because it lasted 5 hours, Frodo, because I could keep thinking of a new way to give it. Like, this
is where we go into the topic for another conversation, but it is like, ultimately then, like, well, we've already touched upon it here, but it's this thing. What word did I say? It's like knowledge is to know that a tomato is a fruit, but wisdom is to not put it in a fruit salad. And it's when you go in, it's the same as with computers when they're trying to learn how to do the chess moves. You can't go through all the 6 trillion options of Go or whatever. The whatever game the computer is playing. There is a way that we use, and you use the word intuition. There's stuff that you know because you have 30 years of experience of performing this particular skill in its many facets for every kind of audience in every situation. So there is an intuition as to what works and what feels good for you, and that gives you this brute force kind of thing that immediately within those 100 tricks, as you arrive and your 3 moment for your 3 tricks comes after having seen what comes before it and what comes after, you will most likely have already weeded out 96 of those. So there might only be 4 or maybe 8 tricks left that you think these could fit. How would we go here? And then you have this repository of all this other stuff that can be brought in at any time. But by
the same token, the opposite end of the spectrum of like just building a show organically from A to B to C in the rehearsal space in the moment, probably being on the extreme end of that, I'm not such a fan of. But there is the reality that even with all the planning in the world, you have to be open in the moment and creation to solving these problems creatively, and being open to opportunities. Then So it's like everything, right? It's like a balance between the two in terms of what skills to bring. Like I wouldn't necessarily want to walk into a creation space with you with no skills and build them from scratch, but I wouldn't want to walk into that creation space completely filling it 100% with preconceived skills, because there's no room for us then to create something special together, which is like what we did that the other day in Norway. So it's a balance, like everything.
When we did Reflex, you brought a whole bunch of what we think of as physical skills, and mainly what I input that I did was then to work with text and to work with meaning and structure or whatever, on like, how do we put this together, and how out of all the hundreds of hours of material that you have got in shows. And we watched some of those, and I watched some specific things that you sent me, and I had already just been looking around at different things. Right. So I had a vocabulary of what you could do. And so that was sort of like we decided that there was so little I could add to when you made the magnet clubs. You did that sort of on your own. I looked at it and gave my comments to it and said, I like it when it's like this or like that. Or I like this. I see this as a through line or whatever. Yeah. But apart from some very general remarks as to what the function of it was at that point, because we've led the audience to a certain point. Right. That's kind of the thing that I was bringing into it, which is something that we can talk about next time.
Also next time we
continue to talk about language. Because even in the examples that we've done today, we haven't really delved into using language as part of it. And
right. Yeah, including language with the skills.
Using language, or being, how concrete can you be with your narrative in your piece?
Right on. And also, I think the really big question unanswered for me today, I think, is this idea of, you talked earlier about being impressed by skill. Remember we were talking about being at the opera, and you're in the opera, you're in the flow of this fantasy, and then all of a sudden the people are jumping, and you're impressed by that, and you're in the moment impressed. And I have a big question for you about that for next time, about being impressed by skill. So
good. Because I think part of my key to that is that we just like to see something done well. I think that's the most fundamental part of that. Impressed is a more specific way. But anyway, I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, because that could potentially be disastrous in a certain situation. But we'll talk about that next time.
Talk about that. We'll leave these people hanging on that cliffhanger. Great.
Yeah, man.
Well, it's been a pleasure as always.
Yeah, thanks for hanging out tonight. I had a lot of fun.
I had a lot of fun too.
Cool.
It was great.
Are you going to press stop recording?
I'm going to press stop recording now.
Okay.
Have a good one. See you next time.
Yes, sir.
The great thing about a conversation such as this, when done in good faith and when both are trying to arrive at understanding, and you never really know exactly where it goes or what kind of illuminations that you will have. I certainly had a few little epiphanies and had course corrections and had changed my ideas a little bit, but in a very good way. And that's why I enjoy having these conversations, and I hope they are enjoyable to you and illuminating as well. For now, it'd be excellent if you haven't already, if you're just tuning in, to click subscribe to follow The Way. In that way, then you will not miss any episodes, and they will be available to you on that long journey you'll all of a sudden find yourself on when there's no internet. If you like this podcast project so much that you want to support me, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/CaptainFrodo. buymeacoffee.com/CaptainFrodo. And if you don't have any money, or you want to support the podcast, please leave a review, or even more so, post about it on your favorite social media channel. Tell your friends this is the way, and the way could also be for you. Anyway, thanks for listening, and with all that said, all that's left to be said is take care of yourself, and those you love, and I hope to see you along the way.